Welcome to the Chris Hanna Show.
All right, welcome everyone to the Chris Hanna Show. We are very excited today with our guest. We have Chris McAuley. He is the founder and owner of MCAVOY Incorporated. He is a business leader, a manager, an owner with over 35 years of experience in both for-profit and nonprofit industries. Additionally, Chris is a professional speaker, an image consultant, a sales consultant, helping businesses and individuals really achieve lasting leadership in business and in life. He's got a background in theater, which we're going to dive into, performance and image consulting, and he uses that experience to provide managers with tools to foster trusting relationships, increase employee engagement, and really revitalize company culture. Chris, so excited to have you on here today. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So as I talk through a bit of your bio there, like you've really done a lot. And so I really want to understand, like, tell me the origin story of kind of where you were and what you're doing now. Like, what's that ride been like for you?
You know, I've been really fortunate. I feel like I've got so many passions. You know, people always say I got to find a passion. I feel like I've had too many. I feel like I don't have enough time to pursue them and really get into them. So for me, ever since I was a kid, I had so many things that I really, really, truly wanted to do. And when I started off, I originally was going to school. I was actually going to go do science because I had a real passion. I love science. My father was a forensic examiner, very well-known forensic pathologist. So I wanted to pursue his field and get into that. Then I just found out it wasn't for me. And then I ended up pursuing physiology at York University and was going to become a coach and was really pursuing that. Then I found out kind of more on the admin, you know, you sort of do these twists and turns. And I ended up started working for the YMCA in Toronto because I was a YMCA kid from when I was really young. And I love that. That was my not-for-profit experience. I absolutely love the not-for-profit world. I don't think it gets enough credit as it should, quite frankly. But I absolutely love my experience. I did that for about 15 years and loved it. I was in Toronto, born and raised. And so I actually moved to London, Ontario because of the Y. They were doing some recruitment. I got here. I took on one of my first manager roles. That was an incredible experience. I didn't quite realize the impact it would have coming from a big city, especially Toronto, because we're both Canadians. We know what that means for some communities. And then arriving in London, it was hard. Probably one of the most challenging things I ever went through as a leader.
Was that your first time being a manager when you moved to London?
No, I was a manager in Toronto, but one of the things I didn't realize when I came here, I just talked to, I think it was one of the videos I posted recently on my LinkedIn feed. It was just that rolling in to a smaller community and not appreciating the fact that they had already done things their way for so long and not really respecting that, coming in and changing things too quickly. And as I went through that experience, it really, quite frankly, backfired on me. And I'll be totally honest. As soon as I arrived in there and started working there, there was a petition to get me fired within like a few weeks. People absolutely hated me. And it was mainly because I just rolled in there. I was young. I didn't know. I thought this was the way you're supposed to do things. It was sort of that early manager, you know, you're pretty naive. You think I'm going to make changes real fast because I knew I had to. But you know what? Fortunately enough, I had just moved my family and I said, I got to make this work. And I also wanted to make it work for myself. And so that was one of the biggest leadership lessons I ever learned. Changed my career from that point on. Really started to form how I operated and what I did moving forward. So I did that for a number of years. But the whole time, I remember my wife always saying to me, she said, Chris, you're always talking about wanting to work in the for-profit world. I'd done the not-for-profit. And so I ended up leaving the Y in 2001, early 2000s, and then made the transfer to sales. Was fortunate enough to work in a company called Spectrum Communications here in London. It'd been around since 1979, run by an owner by the name of Gordon Mayhew, who, hats off to him. He gave me the opportunity, took on sales, and wow, was that ever a learning experience?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely like a whole other world, right?
Man, because the number of people, and I saw this with some other reps as well. Anybody new to sales, everybody thinks sales is easy. Everybody thinks that sales is this thing where you golf, you do lunches, it's easy to make money, you're wealthy, you know, you get the easy jobs. It had got to be the hardest thing I think I've ever done in my entire life. Getting up every day. And of course, when I started, we were somewhat old school in our approach. It was the classic 20, 25 cold calls a day. You brought them in, you reported them.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I had everything happen to me. Business card torn up, screamed at to get out. Nobody wanted to talk to me. And I remember when you do that day in and day out, month after month, that is where I started to develop that grit and that perseverance. I had that before, but did I really understand how to kind of work through that and deal with that negativity? It was unbelievable. That gave me the thick skin, and I really got an appreciation for sales. And I was fortunate enough to hang on, and things turned around like they always do in sales, right? It's if you see anything through, all those no's start to become yeses, and you start to understand that. When you first hear that, you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen, but it does. And I stuck with it and went on to be sales and became sales manager, then director of sales, and then general manager, and then we sold the company. And that's when I decided to head out. So for basically the next 20 years, those 20 years I was in sales and kind of went through that whole thing with Spectrum. They were bought out by a US company. And I decided at that point that I was just gonna stand down and move on. And the fun that I had with that, as I said earlier, I had so many passions. While I was doing all that, I always loved theater. And I loved getting up and talking and speaking. And I never had a lot of fear with that, doing presentations, speaking in front of groups. I know for a lot of people, that's a really tough thing to do. For some reason, I just felt okay with it. I could do it. You're always nervous, but I always wanted to do the theater thing. I always wanted to perform. So I started doing that while I was working full time. And London, Ontario had pre-COVID a very vibrant, active theater community. The art community in this city is actually like a lot of towns. Windsor's the same. Toronto's the same. Ottawa's the same. Like there's a lot of these pockets of small cities in Ontario that have got an artistic community that is so alive. A lot of people doing a lot of interesting work. London especially. So I acted and did, I think I acted for about 15, 16 years. Would still do it now. It's not something that COVID really killed it, unfortunately, as you can imagine. A lot of that gig business really got hit hard with that. So haven't gone back to it, but definitely open to it. One of my dreams is I'm working on a one-man show that I will do in the next couple of years. I'm just working on writing it now and pulling that together. And one of my dreams was to actually put that together, because I think that's a real true test of an actor, is to get on stage and hold an audience for an hour and a quarter, and just deliver a performance that they're going to remember.
Absolutely. To be a one-man show and trying to hold somebody's attention that entire time is a challenge for sure, right? I think about, like, as I'm hearing you talk about your journey, the word confidence comes to mind, especially like there's a confidence that's required when someone's speaking, when someone's acting, when someone's trying to sell. Talk to me about confidence, and maybe for listeners who maybe are struggling with confidence, is there advice that you could give them on how to have that presence or have that confidence?
Yeah, and it's really about practice and doing it. That's really what it is. It's being able to get over that fear that you have for yourself, that you're not going to be able to do it, that you're going to fall flat, or that you're going to trip up, you're going to forget a line, you're going to stumble, and what are people going to think? I remember when I first started acting, the best advice I ever got was somebody who told me what Sir Laurence Olivier said, and I think I mentioned this in one of my posts recently around, it's okay to be nervous. A lot of people have a tendency to beat themselves up because they think when they're nervous, you're weak, you're not confident, I'm scared, therefore I can't do this, and your nerves just really start to eat you alive. And this is whether you're standing in front of 6 people for a sales presentation or 600 doing a keynote address, even just doing the one-on-ones, the cold calling, having the confidence to be able to stand there and go in. Was I nervous? Yeah. Did I feel sick to my stomach sometimes doing shows? Yeah. It's being able to kind of just push through that. The more you do it, the easier it gets, and understanding that the nerves are okay and that it's okay to be scared. Because that's where I find the confidence just starts to get drained, because we start to fall down that rabbit hole of, I'm scared, I'm not good enough, I'm going to make a mistake, as opposed to just focusing on what it is that you want to say and just saying it, and not trying to pay attention or get pulled away with all that stuff that's going on in the background, all that noise. And the only way you really get to deal with that and start to control with that is practice. It's doing it. It's doing
It's about
it.
putting in the reps, right? Like just,
Yeah.
continuing to do it. That's the way you're going to grow. Like when you talk about
Yes.
working out, the more you continue to have that routine, obviously the more you're going to grow your muscle, right? But
Exactly.
the more that you put yourself out there, like I think about sales is one of those things. You talked about grit. It's like, it's one of those things where you are trained obviously to overcome objections, but also just to take objections and then let it bounce off you and not let it affect you. Has that helped you as you've now started to build out and do your own thing now?
Huge, huge. Because one of the biggest things I learned, and the same thing happens in acting, if you want to live in a world of rejection, go out and audition, because you'll get rejected just like sales. Like, like for every 50 times you audition, you'll get one role. Same with sales, for every 50 calls, you get the one success. When you go through that, it's the hardest thing. And if you just have to continuously believe that at some point it's going to turn. And, I've had people tell me, you got to stay on the train. Too many people give up too early. Hearing that really helped as well. And then when you get the win, when you get that piece, that's when you go, okay, all right, this does work. I just got to keep at it. And then it starts, as opposed to 50 calls with rejection, it now becomes 40. And then you start to get better at being able to go out and turn those calls around, learning what it is I have to do, whether it's an audition or whether it's a cold call. So I think I really developed the ability to think fast on your feet, to pay attention to what was going on. You become a little more aware. Okay, when I'm going to stop talking, when I should talk, when I should push, when I shouldn't push, all those little nuances that really help you do the close, if you will. Once you start to develop that, and I knew when I got into this to start my own thing, it's going to be a long haul. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It takes time. There'll be a lot of no's, going to make a lot of mistakes, but learning that through sales was the best thing. That's where all that came from. That's how all that helped me get to where I am now, to have the confidence to know, what? Yeah, I didn't show a lot of profit in my first year. That's okay.
That gives you like the confidence to try. And I think that is so important. And I think a lot of people, they struggle with that. They have an idea. They like, this would be a great idea. I want to turn this into a business, but they never take action. Right. So you've taken action. Yes. You have now decided that you are, you're going on your own. Talk to me about that. What is this business all about that you're now trying to run and really grow?
Well, one of the things that I found that I really struggled with when I was leading, and I've seen a lot of your posts, and I think you and I align in a lot of the same thinking. The command and the control approach to leadership just never seemed to work for me. And I could never quite understand how leaders and managers, I could understand, but it never made any sense to me. Why do you view your role as a leader about you and this power trip, and that you get to tell people what to do? And it's so interesting sometimes, and I've watched it, and I'm sure you've seen it, where you give people, or people get that power, if you will, they get that position, and then instantly they start to develop this command. Well, I'm the leader and I say, and this is what's going to happen. Now,
I'm the boss, do what I say, right? And
exactly.
A lot of new people do that, especially. Like I was guilty of that early on.
Yeah. Well, I told you, people wanted to run me out of town. That's how bad I was when I started. Yeah, and that's why I said that one lesson I was learned at that point. Wow, I really have to. What am I doing? This is not making any sense. This is not why I'm here. It is about, as a leader, I started to look at it that I have the privilege to lead you. I'm not in a privileged position. You don't work for me. I literally work for you. And I know a lot of people say that. Yes. But I really started to embrace it and saw the value in that. In that first instance, when I moved to London, Ontario, and I had that issue of my first manager role, that really taught me that. It's like, okay, I got to really flip this around. And so, but over the years, I always noticed that people in that manager role and leadership role, there's still a lot of that command and control. Like you said, here's what you're going to do because I say you will do. As opposed to really looking at it that, what is it that I can do as a leader to make your job easier and allow you to grow and allow you to be able to be the best that you can be? Here I am running an operation that people literally spend more time with me and in this business than they do with who they married or who their family. Let's face it, we spend more time at work than we do with friends and family. It's just the way it is. So as a leader, I look at that and say, I got a responsibility to make this place positive, inclusive, make you feel comfortable, allow you to be the best that you can be. That doesn't happen if it's command and control. That doesn't happen if I don't sit and listen and connect and respect you. You know, that piece of paper says, yeah, I'm the leader, but that doesn't mean respect. That doesn't mean trust. That's earned, and that takes time. And that's, right. I really believe a lot in that relational manager was where I spent my time. So Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, a lot of that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
Paul Grant's another one. A lot of those are Adam Grant, rather. That kind of thinking around organizational behavior, I just really aligned with. And I thought, yes, this is the way to do it. This is the way that I think a lot of companies should. And to be honest with you, Chris, I am starting to see that shift. It's starting to happen. I think we're seeing more of that acceptance of emotions in the workplace, really paying attention to care for people more so than we did before. It's beyond just a paycheck, and leaders taking more of a responsibility. Still a lot of command and control. I think that still happens, but I am seeing a real switch. And I think part of that's the generation that's in the workplace now. Mm-hmm. They're not going to take it. We did. I mean, I grew up, that's what I kind of grew up in. You know, get over there and do your job because I told you to, and we just accepted it. I find a lot of the folks now, even with my kids, they don't put up with that. They'll go.
It's a whole different generation, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you come in then at the employer level, or are you working with like HR partners? Are you working with leaders directly, or business owners, or how does the model work?
Basically, work with a lot of HR people is where I start with. Although I find a lot of HR practices, because it's so interesting. I've noticed a real switch in human resources. I find now that years ago, HR was more of the positive work environment, the rah, making everything really very fun to be. I mean, that's what I remember a lot of HR people doing. I'm starting to see a lot of HR now is far more policy, far more protection for the company, which they should do. That's part of their job. But so much time spent on sort of regulations and making sure policies and employment law and all that other sort of stuff is followed, which is great. But what happens about helping the culture? What happens about engagement? Who's taking the time to make sure that leaders and managers are connecting with their people, taking advantage of the informal communication and the formal one-on-ones, and really being able to leverage those moments that you have with your employees to be able to really connect with them. And like I said, get the best, have them feel safe. When we feel safe, you can, you basically will do anything for people. I mean, I'd take a bullet for some leaders I've worked for. Why? Because they respected me. I felt like they listened to what I had to say. I wasn't just another, check. I wasn't just another body. And so HR people is where I can start. Business owners, usually I find myself in a smaller company, smaller businesses, and really starting to help mid-level managers, people who've had a little bit of experience. But as you and I say, a lot of this stuff, although I see more of it happening in some of the curriculums with some of the universities, I still think we've got a long way to go with some of those real life things that you can do when you're day to day in the office, even with the hybrid environment. That whole idea of staying connected with people.
Totally. Like I'm going to give you a hot take, and I want your opinion on it. You tell me if I'm off based on this, but in my experience through coaching and consulting and also being in the corporate world too, I feel like while there's a lot of talk about customer experience, a lot of talk about employee experience, there's not enough talk about the leadership experience. There's not enough focus on helping leaders become their best selves, because if they're not bringing their best selves every day, it's going to be hard for them to be there for their employees, and ultimately for those employees to be there for those customers as it trickles down. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest things I think you've got, and it's challenging. A lot of it's more in the role. If you played the individual business coach, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You as a leader, you have to be aware of your stuff. You have to be aware of what you're good at and not good at. And again, there's a tendency when you take on some leadership roles that you're supposed to know everything, that you're supposed to be good at everything, that you're this positive, everything's great with me, when really that's not the case. I think it's far better to be aware of your challenges, where you fall short. I don't do that well. So I'm going to need some help with that, and being really vulnerable that way in front of people. It
takes some self-awareness and confidence to be able to do that, right? Which is also takes time to develop that skill set.
Yep. Well, so in a lot of it too, I mean, we come back to the whole sales thing, the conversation we had at the beginning, where knocking on doors and doing cold calls is like being a leader. Be ready to admit that you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You blew it, and be willing to stand up in front of people and say, yeah, that's on me. And what am I going to learn from it? And I know we hear all this, and a lot of people say it. And it's so funny. I heard a podcast with, I think it was the Brene Brown. It was a great podcast. Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, and then Adam Grant, 3 real big influencers. And they talked about that everybody talks about wanting to do this, but nobody does it.
Yeah.
And so I think we hear a lot of talk and we hear a lot of conversations because it's hard, because it means people have got to really open themselves up. And particularly in a leadership role, you've got to be willing to stand up in front of your people and say, yeah, I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
And not be afraid of what's going to happen when that happens. But again, it's practice. It's not so bad when you do it, when you step up and say, hey, yeah, I really made the mistake here. I
think to be vulnerable, though, I think it takes leaders building that trust and rapport with their team. And the only way that can happen is when they communicate. Because my other hot take I will say is that all problems that happen in business are communication problems.
Absolutely.
Right? Either we didn't say the right thing, we didn't talk to the right person, we avoided the conversation that we should have had. But like one-on-ones, you mentioned those, like that is something I think that is overlooked by some leaders, the importance of connecting one-on-one with your team. When I would go in and I consult with business owners who are kind of just maybe newer, like I focus a lot with solopreneurs who've now like kind of hired that next team that they start to build out. They don't know about the importance of just connecting one-on-one. They just think, okay, I'll just give people the list of things to do and they just do it, but you got to check in with them.
Yeah.
You got to be there for them.
Yes.
Support them, help them personally, professionally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, one of the workshops I've delivered is on that whole idea around, if you're a manager and in a leadership role, whether it's in a hybrid work environment or face-to-face or complete remote, how do I stay connected, and how do I know that I got to be able to stay connected? How do I know what I got to work on? So one of the things I always talk about is with any leader, and it's amazing how many don't put this in place. You've got to have a couple of people who are willing to have a very open, frank conversation about how you're being perceived. That's where some of that vulnerability, I mean, it's one thing to stand up in front of an entire group and say it. Okay, let's not necessarily go that far. Let's find 1 or 2 people who have got the trust of most of your team, who know the business quite well, but have got a relationship with you where you've been able to say, you know what, I'm going to check in with you once in a while, because I don't know how I'm coming across. I may be coming across the wrong way, like I did very early.
Yeah.
So the best thing I ever have done, and I tell a lot of leaders this, everywhere I've worked, I've always found 1 or 2 people. And we're not talking about snitches here. We're not talking about drama or having it. It's about me. So yeah, Chris, that was a bit harsh. Or I'd go and I'd say, you know what? I really want to talk about this with everybody. Where is everybody at? And people would tell me. They say, yeah, maybe now's not a good time. No, people really need to hear that. Or they'd come to me and say, I think now's the time. When you have people doing that for you, it's a lot easier with just 1 or 2 people who help you deliver what it is that you need to deliver at the right time. Because you might not know. You're a leader. You're busy. We all got so much going on, right? There's so much. You got the quarter you got to make. You got numbers. You're getting demands placed on you. It's impossible to keep up. So one of the things I always talk to leaders about, find 1 or 2 people who you trust and can have those conversations with you.
Excellent advice. I think that is so important. And I've also been a big believer of that throughout my career too. It makes a world of difference.
Hugely.
So you started this business on the leadership side, but you also have this side of you where you're this image consultant.
Yes.
Talk to me about that. What is that about?
Well, okay. So I grew up in a household with my father was very much a dandy. So was my uncle, my godfather. Big thing in my family was going to go get a tailored suit when you were a teenager. So I grew up with a real love for clothes, and I really have always just had an affinity to that. So the whole style thing and that whole idea around, how do people kind of have that? I was always fascinated with the Steve McQueens and the Paul Newmans and some of these guys today. You've got a few people like Daniel Craig, Brad. Some of these guys who are they're just naturals at it. And as I started to really explore some of that, as I knew I was going to go off on my own, I wanted to take a deeper look at this whole image consulting thing. What I discovered, of course, is that for me, where I start with, clothes are very small. They're part of it, but they're
not the whole thing.
I push it way back. There's a lot of image consultants. I have a lot of respect for them. They're more clothiers. They really help people with clothes. For me, and again, this kind of comes from my theater background, I became understanding about the real value of storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people have a hard time, and because it's not easy to be able to really clearly articulate your story, who you are. And so I went off and I actually combined the image consulting with learning a lot about business storytelling, leadership business storytelling, and how to work with people to be able to get the information out, craft their story. And once their story is there and they're able to articulate it and they embrace it, now we can start talking about, okay, does your wardrobe align with your story? Does the way you come across align with your story? Does all of that stuff that really is your, what's the word? Your kind of your superpower, if you will. I've heard that term tossed around. What's your superpower? What is it that you want people to talk about? What story do you want to tell? How do you want to be perceived when you go in the room? How do you want to be perceived when you leave the room? Those kinds of questions. And so I really found that the image consulting was really more about personal branding in a way. That slice of branding,
absolutely. Yep.
how I want to come across and how do I want my image to project. And so clothes become very secondary. And a lot of it is about who you are here and being very, very authentic. Because at the end of the day, when you're out there, how people remember you, how people are going to remember something about you and a takeaway, it's whatever is very unique about you. That's really what separates you from everyone else. Not everybody's lived your life. Not everybody's done what you've done.
There's only one you, right?
Exactly. So it's being able to pull that out, and then we start to craft the image around that. And so that's where the image consulting piece came in. And so a lot of what I started to understand as I started to piece this together, I thought, I've got this real love for business because I love the sales and I love the business side of things. I love organizational culture. And I really wanted to be part of this wave that I'm starting to see sort of turn around, being able to create a really good workplace, combined with where can I bring in some of the artistic stuff that I love about acting and the theater world. And so that's where the storytelling came in. And then that's where I started to think about, okay, there's the storytelling, there's this relational side of things, and then there's this image that's got to go with it. And I came up with the sense that a lot of that is about living consciously. It's about being very conscious, being very intentional about who you are. You can't really do that if you don't know what that is and you don't really embrace what that is. So that's why my company tagline is about conscious connections. It's about being very, very conscious, whether it's in a leadership role or whether it's in yourself when you're out networking or how you present yourself. But it's living consciously, which I think is very challenging to do because a lot of us, when you get busy in business, we switch on autopilot.
Absolutely.
It gets hard, right? Things we forget to do. So that's where it all sort of came together. And that's how I packaged it up as a business. And that's where the presenting piece came in as well. Because I do find that when people get up to tell their story, often a lot of the presenting, some of it is about how they present, but it's also about crafting the presentation.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got a very heavy data loaded presentation, you can tell a lot of stories around data. You can make it very interesting to people. You can make it so that when people hear you speak, when they leave, they're like, you know what, I'm gonna remember that, which is really what we all want, right? We want to be able to have that connection. So that's where
I think it's fascinating as I'm hearing you talk about this. Like, you've got your background, your history that you've kind of went through that led you to what you're doing now. And it's just like, it's the journey of all those steps kind of form now your dot, like what you are all about, like each step along the journey. So you're now as an entrepreneur. Talk to me about like what kind of key lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur about yourself, about, you know, maybe some of the challenges that you're kind of having to maybe go through, because I think that's important for listeners to also hear.
Yeah, I think, well, it's like anything, right? It's you kind of figure we all have that. For a lot of us who take big risks, at times we all kind of think, how hard can it be? So we sometimes go in with that approach only to find out it's really hard. I think the biggest lesson for me when I came out of it was realizing that I'm now the marketing person, the accountant, the legal guy, the sales guy.
Because the chief everyone officer.
Yeah, that is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned, is trying to balance all of that. And then I think the other challenge that I found that I've really learned a lot about as we were talking about earlier, is this whole idea around how do I get it out there? I
Yes.
mean, and so many people, and I'm sure you've known people who've done this. They got a great idea. They got a great business. They're really solid. They got a good product and a good idea, but nobody knows about it.
Yes.
And I
Marketing is
think
the hardest part, honestly, I think.
totally agree. I think that's the hardest thing for anybody that's going out there right now, because in the mess and all the stuff that's out there, how do you find your audience? How do you find your tribe? However you want to verbalize it. How do you
Yep.
find those people that are going to want your services and want to share that with you and want to be part of that with you? I mean, that is the hardest thing, I think, for me. And that's really what I've learned is more and more about how you present that, and how you deliver a message, how you hook people in, all that stuff. And I never really, because I had other people doing that, of course, right? When you work in the corporate world, other people look after that. So a lot of those things is really what I've learned over the past year.
Are there certain channels that you're focusing on to help you with getting that message out?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the big one, because I think LinkedIn, from a business side of view, I think that's probably where my biggest audience is. And so I like LinkedIn, and that's where I focus a lot of my business side. I do operate on Instagram, because that's more where the image consultants, a lot of image consultants use Instagram because it's a very visual kind of business. People are often looking at clothes and different style things and those sorts of things. So I also have an Instagram channel that I use. So really Instagram and LinkedIn, two is all I can do right now.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like there's a lot of options, right? To try and manage everything.
Yes.
I tried doing that early on when I started trying to do this journey as a side hustle and I was in the corporate world, and I got overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like to try and be on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, like TikTok now you add that in, and YouTube. It's too much. It is a lot to do when you're solo.
Yes, very much. And if you especially early on, and I'm sure you've dealt with this too, there's this real thing I think that I think a lot of entrepreneurs go through. It's that early stage of I could really have the help. Like if I could have somebody like a virtual assistant or somebody to give me a hand with this or run with this. But if you're not generating the necessary profits to do that, it's the chicken. Like, but if I did, I'd get more. But if I don't do it, I might not ever get to that point. You know what I mean? It's having that
totally.
It's building that space. And so what decision do you make, and when do you pull the trigger on getting the help, and when do you hold back? And so that to me is the other thing I'm learning right now. It's that timing of everything.
Yeah.
Although I really feel fortunate enough that so far any selection I've done, with some of the, with help with marketing, website, and some other stuff, the apps that I've been using, I've been very fortunate. Everything's worked.
Yeah.
I've heard some horror stories. So far, I've been very fortunate not to have any of those. I've been very lucky to discover some of the apps that are very useful. There's a ton out there, as I'm sure as you know. Like the options are endless.
Like there's a lot of technology that can help, right? Like with my company Hire For Me that I have, like obviously I'm helping solopreneurs and entrepreneurs hire that next person once they're ready to go from being 1 to 2 to 3 or 4 or whatever, right? And it's a hard decision to make that call to say, when do you do it, right? When do you hire? So I always say, like, you got to make sure that you have financial stability. Like you're bringing in enough revenue to justify having somebody there, right? Because you don't want to bring somebody in, you're like, I got no profits and I can't reinvest back into the business. You got to make sure that you have the time to be able to devote to somebody as well. Because the worst thing you can do is hire someone and they're not like supported. And as we talked about with leadership earlier, right? They have to have that support, because if they don't have the support, that's not going to last long term. Like having enough work is just also critical important, but you got to decide, like there's multiple ways to do it. You can either do it completely on your own. You can hire VAs, you can have contractors, freelancers, or hire people permanently in your business. It depends on where you're at, but you need enough stability in order to do that. It is a tough call to make that decision to move forward and to hire. But it's fun being an entrepreneur, is it not?
Love it. Love it. The biggest thing I love is that I'm on my own. I'm not beholden to anybody, which is where I really wanted to be. So that to me is probably the best. I do miss the people. It is at times, I will say that. I mean, you're so used to being around people, and when you're in a manager leadership role, you've always got people calling you and there's that interaction. I do miss that, but really you're too busy to really even sit down and really think about that. But there are moments where I think, I wish I had some other people to kind of connect with and collaborate with a little bit on this. So, but other than that, I absolutely love it. Best thing I've ever done. I wish I had started earlier, which I know a lot of entrepreneurs say.
They always say that. Yeah, absolutely.
But I do believe, you're here because this is where you're supposed to be at this moment, right? So I think it all worked out for me in that sense. And there were so many other things I want to do. Like I'm very involved in other sort of things locally here in town, particularly in the arts. And that's the thing I wanted to do, was to be on a couple of boards and be very involved in some things.
Yes.
Because I do know a lot of boards, they're, trying to get board members today is really tough for a lot of organizations. And so I really wanted to be part of that. So that's something else I do as well. It's just I really wanted to, this was not only a real passion to kind of build a business around what I wanted to do, but it was also a lifestyle switch, as it is, I think, for some.
As it is for a lot of people, right? I believe that what we've gone through as a society over the last few years has kind of created this world where people really care most about, honestly, I think, flexibility and having that lifestyle where they can kind of do what they want, when they want, where they want, however they want. That's so important.
Very.
So, Chris, I've taken a lot of your time today. I appreciate the value that you've shared in your story. Where can people find out more about you? You talked about some of those channels. Talk to me about like your website, your contact information, so we can make sure that people can follow you and to work with you and learn more about you and your background.
Sure. Well, LinkedIn, if you go to my profile, just look me up, Chris McAuley. And once you see my profile on there, I've got a definite Let's Connect, which then takes you to my website. And there's a form on there that you can fill out to contact me on the website. I have the same thing on Instagram. It's Chris McAuley. I actually started the Instagram account many, many years ago when I was still in the corporate world. It actually has the handle Silver and Suave, which was a handle that came to me from my photographer, because I have a photographer that does a lot of my shots. But I have a lot of information on there. So if you go to my Instagram account, Silver and Suave, I've got another connection to, it's got my email address on there, as well as an automatic connection to my website. Which again, you can fill out the form and you can contact me that way and I get them right away. So that's probably the easiest way to find any kind of connection with me.
Well, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. Just incredible value. I can't wait to see what you continue to do. I love seeing your posts. I can tell that I think blue might be your favorite color based on what you're wearing today and the post backgrounds and stuff that I'm seeing. I feel like you've got a closet that has got some blue in it. I'm just guessing.
Yes, it's my, cobalt blue and orange, oddly enough, were kind of the corporate colors.
Gotcha. Well, I look forward to following more of the journey, Chris. Like, it is absolutely amazing. Thank you for being on the show.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Chris Hanna Show. As always, the latest episodes are available to listen and subscribe to on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow The Chris Hanna Show on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Twitter. For more resources and solutions, including blog posts, toolkits, ebooks, speaking sessions, and more, visit chrishanna.ca today. We look forward to connecting again with you soon for another episode of The Chris Hanna Show.